We students at the nonprofit organization FINXERUNT would love to have you speak at our back to school reopening panel.
We want your voice to be heard and represented during these times.
As you know, with the coronavirus pandemic, reopening schools across America is going to be extremely difficult.
This will be a decision that needs the voices of doctors, scientists, economists, politicians, teachers, parents, and students alike to come together and discuss.
Our panel will be featured on FINXERUNT.org and YouTube Live, as hundreds of parents, students, and teachers across the country will be invited to RSVP.
With so much confusion and stress in the air, people like you will help in spreading public health awareness for the coming fall.
What makes this event special is that this panel discussion is completely student-led and discussing the reopening of schools in our nation.
We need your voice heard, and we would love for you to schedule a time to meet with us and a couple of our panelists as well.
We hope to see you soon.
We can all introduce ourselves right now.
After you.
I'm Deepa Saha. I'm the co-strategies and organization of FINXERUNT.
I'm Elizabeth Schwartz, and I'm the Vice Executive Director of FINXERUNT, and it's really nice to meet you, Mr. Kalos.
Hi, how are you? I'm Councilmember Ben Kalos. I represent the Upper East Side, East Harlem, East Midtown, Roosevelt Island. I was elected to the City Council in my early 30s. I'm still in my 30s, one of the younger council members, and I've got a 2.5-year-old daughter who might join at some point impromptu as we all work from home in the new normal. And I couldn't be more excited to talk to these students.
Liz, you want to get started with the questions?
Yeah, so we'll start off with the first interview question whenever you're ready.
I'm ready. Let's go.
So our first question for you is, what is your role in leading the citywide response to COVID-19?
That's a great question because different elected officials handled the crisis very differently. There are a lot of people who actually just didn't know what to do. In my case, we actually took the coronavirus head on. We actually launched a communications portal. We created a new email address, coronavirus@benkalos. We use that to source beds, PPE, you name it. So just in my council district, we opened 350 new beds for coronavirus patients on Roosevelt Island. Then we also reached out to other hospitals in my district. We had a hospital for special surgery. Elective surgeries were canceled. Then we said, can we use those beds? They made those 200 beds available for surge. In total, that was 550 beds. And that's actually half as much as we got from the USNS Comfort, which I think only treated a couple of dozen patients. So that's been pretty big. We also did everything we could to source PPE materials when there weren't really any. And so we got a lot of those for the hospitals in the district and the city at large. And at the beginning, I remember a lot of people saying, oh, we shouldn't have testing. Don't get tested. That was a big thing. And it was the worst thing I could have ever imagined in my life because it was kind of this like capitalist notion of we didn't have enough. We had scarcity and we actually worked with professionals, doctors, scientists to see, can we get more tests? And the goal is to make sure that we actually have enough tests for everyone. And even to this day, we're seeing 10-day delays throughout the city. And instead of telling people not to get tested, we need to just get everybody tested. We also did a lot in terms of telling people about their rights as tenants. People were afraid of losing their housing over this. I'm a parent. It was really tough during the pandemic. So we did a parenting during the pandemic. We had community conversations. We also opened up affordable housing. We actually had 1,000 affordable housing units on the Upper East Side. And there was just so much going on, and we really rose to the occasion and did everything we could to help.
Sounds good. Moving on to our second question. How has the government response to COVID-19 adapted from March to now? And what steps are you guys taking to prepare for the future of the pandemic?
When it started, it was about beds, it was about PPE, and it was about ventilators and just saving lives. As that transition past the initial spike, it became clear that there was a huge economic impact. People were losing access to food. Food prices have gone up. And so we shifted a lot of our priorities to getting people fed. So we worked with the food pantries in the neighborhood. We actually repurposed a group called Wildcat, which is formerly homeless, justice-involved individuals, from doing quality of life, street cleaning, to actually delivering meals to people who needed it. We also started to figure out how do we get to the new normal. So we started closing streets. So I was able to get East End in my district closed as a play street. It was one of the first streets to close. We also started pushing for outdoor dining, which is now a thing in the city. And I was one of the first elected officials there with Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer and others to start pushing for it. And last but not least, we were advocating for assistance for small businesses right before the federal government put forward the PPP, which unfortunately seems to have gone to a lot of big corporations and not as many small businesses. So I think a lot of it's just been trying to figure out how to transition safely to a new normal.
Thank you for that response. So since the school year is coming up, and like as a parent, it's really important to know how the school year will look like. Our next question is, how has the New York City Council specifically prepared to reopen schools or help schools shift to blended learning?
So first and foremost, my job is to listen. 2 ears, one mouth, as they say. So I'll ask both of you, Deepa, Elizabeth, how do you feel about opening schools? Do you feel that you should be going back to in-person right now today? Would you go today if you could, or where are you on it?
I actually chose remote. I feel more comfortable at home rather than actually going in.
Yeah, I chose blended, but I do think that there should be a delay because I think that first we should focus on making sure each school is equipped to like have PPE and masks and social distancing, because every school is very different. And I wouldn't want someone to be more at risk just because of where they go to school, as opposed to someone who goes to school that's better prepared to handle this. So I think until like we equip schools with the proper equipment, then we shouldn't go back to school.
I think both of you stole my talking points because I got my talking points from you. My job is to be your advocate, to listen to you, to listen to your parents. And so I think it is Mayor de Blasio's job with mayoral control of schools to convince you and me that it is safe for children to return to school. And I don't think he's done that. I don't think he's put forward real plans, and we've been pushing him every step of the way. When he announced the blended learning, I came out and said, Mayor, where are the kids going to learn? They can't just be home because a lot of parents are going to be at work. So I said that we should have remote learning centers. And he actually listened to it, but he said he would only do 100,000 slots. And I think we need 500,000. What I'm talking about is the empty libraries, community centers, even empty storefronts. And the idea would be, instead of taking the bus or the train or who knows to get to school that could be an hour away with other kids in a place that might be socially distant, we could actually just say, go downstairs to that empty storefront on your block, sit there with 5 to 10 other kids. There'll be an adult supervising to make sure folks will be safe. You'll have broadband, you'll have laptops, and you'll have everything that you need to learn on the days that you're in the blended remote session. And then for those who are like Deepa, over 400,000 students, Deepa, where do you go to school?
I go to the Bronx High School of Science.
Woo! What about Elizabeth?
I go to Staten Island Technical High School.
Very, very cool. So I want to, Deepa got the woo because I am an alum of Bronx Science. So what I would say is, if you look at and where'd you both go to middle schools?
I went to a zone school. I missed 127.
Okay. And Elizabeth?
I went to a mostly suburban school called IS7 in Staten Island.
Were your schools integrated? Deepa?
I mean, it was. Okay. Can you expand further? I'm sorry.
When you were in your school, did you find that it was a diverse student body, or was it a homogenous student body?
It was a diverse student body. It was diverse.
And what about Elizabeth?
It was very homogenous, and it's not like that it's very different. Like on the North Shore and South Shore schools tend to be a lot more diverse, and South Shore schools, which are very they're not very diverse in their student population.
So a proposal I put forward with Robert Cornegie, who is former chair of the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus, is that we should use these 400,000 students who are remote learning, and not necessarily high school students, but everybody else, and just say, let's create a citywide online learning school. Let's desegregate it, and let's let kids, if they want to do the gifted and talented program, they can either test it, or if they just want to opt in, they can. And I can't believe I'm going to say this on the internet, but I will say that MIT offers these free courses all the time. And I sign up for them to learn astrophysics, which will be very useful for being a council member. And I will tell you, I have flunked out of these astrophysics classes every time because I do it for like a week and I'm really interested, and then like work hits me. But I think that like having this access to everyone would be a great thing. And I think that the school system could provide the supports kids might need, or a student like me might need. So I would like to see a desegregated school system, and I would like to see a school system that gives you the supports that you need. We also worked with parents in the district who were saying that we don't have school nurses in our schools to get full-time nurses, and the mayor's announced that he would do it, but I haven't seen him hire the nurses yet. And so I agree with you and the teachers union and the principals union and parents and everyone saying we need to delay until we know that we have these nurses in place, that we have the equipment in place, and that people actually feel safe.
How will the next few months of school look different for both students and teachers? And how are you guys planning to handle cases of COVID if it does come up in schools?
That, what you're talking about is the scariest piece. The only thing the mayor has outlined is what he will do when he sees cases. It's not an if, it's a when. Our numbers are very high. And one of the things that parents have brought up is the fact that, for instance, in my district right now, the coronavirus rate as of August 25th, I believe is about 4 to 6%. And so they said they would only open schools citywide if we were under 3%. So Upper East Side, 3.6, about, I think 4 to 6%, we shouldn't be opening our schools right now. So there's a lot of unanswered questions about, is this a neighborhood by neighborhood thing? Is it citywide? If you have a neighborhood that's at 7 or 10%, are they going to still keep those schools open? Ultimately, I think the reason we need to delay is so that we can have a way of opening. And I would just say, I'll just go back to testing. No one wants the nasal swab. It's painful. They can do those rapidly. I want to get to a saliva test where we can do the saliva. We can do that in minutes or hours. A kid can show up, get tested, go home, get cleared, go to school, and know that everyone in that building, or even the kid, can stay there while they're waiting for the results, and whether it's minutes or a couple of hours, and then know that when they get into the school, everyone in that building has been tested and cleared. I think that is a pathway to opening safely. And ultimately, I think it's going to be a tough year. And I think one of the things why I want to see all online through a centralized school is like there are kids who learn better by Aristotelian method. There are kids who are like, get that away from me, just let me watch the lecture and I'll ace the test. There are the kids who are like, lectures are boring, let me read the textbook and I'll ace the test. Everyone learns differently. And I'd like to have the kids and families be able to opt into systems that reflect how they want to learn. And because of technology, we can, especially with the blended learning too, we can see which problems you're having trouble with, how long it takes, which questions you got wrong, and then we can use technology to give you the assistance you need. I'd love to live in a world where you did the homework with the teacher there to help you do it, and you read and you did the lectures without the teacher there.
Yeah, that's very important. So thank you for answering that. And our next question is, how can parents and teachers encourage younger students to protect themselves from COVID-19 by wearing a mask and practicing other safety measures?
It starts in the home. Parents have to be a good role model. I would like to see a place where we can figure out how to get kids to have their own mask, have a mask that they like. It could be like first day at school, kids decorate their own masks. I think the thing that I've been hearing about from other parents is they send their kids to school with one mask and they come back with another one, and the parents just lose it. So I think that's going to be really tough. I think that with younger kids, it's going to be tough. When I was a kid, we had this thing called cooties, and kids ran around touching each other saying, I have the cooties or I have the cootie shot. And it's going to be difficult to try to enforce the mask rules and the touching rules and what have you with children who are in places where they're pushing boundaries and may not understand the risk at which they're taking. So I think that's going to be a huge challenge.
What steps can a person and like the students, like the parents, actually take to be safe after like they come home from school, especially if they live with an older relative?
It's going to come down to washing your hands, wearing the masks, taking things seriously in the school. And I really think that it's really going to be on folks like you, Elizabeth and Deepa, that you're going to have a strong voice. And when your school isn't doing what they're saying, particularly Elizabeth, who's going to be in blended, if you don't feel safe, just turning around and walking out. And if you feel being pressured that you shouldn't speak out, to just speak out, because no one's going to know what's happening in the schools other than you, perhaps some teachers. But we're going to need to rely on the students to tell us what's going on, and I will do everything I can to empower you and protect you.
From the perspective of someone who works in the government, what are the benefits and drawbacks of reopening schools in your opinion?
I think the biggest drawback is just I don't want to gamble with anybody's life. And so I think that having the all online is incredibly important. I think that delaying until people are convinced that it is safe to go back to school is important. I really don't want to go back to school, any of the kids to go back to school, unless everyone is convinced that we've put forward every possible safety measure so that we've gotten the risk as close to zero as possible. I'd also like to see more vaccinations. We can't vaccinate for the coronavirus, but we can vaccinate for the flu. And I do want to see everyone vaccinated for the flu. So you don't have I don't want to see a twindemic of the flu and coronavirus. So I think there is that. And I would really love to see more of an emphasis towards the remote learning centers and just reducing the amounts of contact. So I think as much as we can do to keep people safe. I want to thank both of you for the time to talk. I want to share that you can reach me on social media at Ben Kallos, BenKallos. If you haven't registered to vote, when you turn 18, I encourage you to do so. I work for all of you regardless, but you'll be able to vote in elections and really tell politicians what to do. And I'll just say that you are a generation that has led a global climate strike and the March for Our Lives, and that you're going to be in charge sooner than you know it, and I think you already are. So thank you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for coming. Today we have Anna, the co-founder of Sparks Within Reach, a Harvard student speaking at the FINXERUNT reopening panel. Nice to meet you. Tell us about yourself and Sparks Within Reach.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you so much for having me. So my name's Anna. I'm a junior at Harvard, currently studying psychology and education. And I'm one of the co-founders of Sparks Within Reach, which was started in the summer of 2017. And essentially, we are a nonprofit educational organization that provides supplementary academic support for students experiencing houselessness, homelessness, and housing insecurity in New York City. So right now, we are online right now, pairing up volunteers from high schools and colleges with our students at Barrier-Free Living and Ali Forney Center to work on giving them the academic support that they need during the year.
Sounds awesome. I love your initiative. Starting with the first question, how will school reopening affect the mission of Sparks Within Reach?
Yeah, so I would say one of the biggest issues that we've been having during the summer has been lack of engagement. And that's not necessarily because of our students. It's more so because we really rely on the community that we build when we go to these housing centers and these organizations that we're at. And this involves the physical space that we're taking up. So all these students are coming into the same classroom, and although it's a one-on-one platform, we see these students all working in the same room, doing the same thing. So through that, it's creating this community of students and teachers. And we'd even go to the Barrier-Free Living and we'd like knock on the doors of these families and be like, hey, are you coming to Spark Sessions today? We really want to see you. So it requires a lot of engagement from us and physically being there for this community to be built in a way that is effective. So I feel like one of the biggest challenges has been trying to create the same kind of safe space online. And it's difficult because these students are working from home, and that might not always be a safe space for them. So for us to create that on an online platform has shown to be challenging. But ways that we're really working through that is trying to create more classroom sessions. So having all of our tutors and all of our students be in the same session. But again, that shows to be a challenge as well, because scheduling is really difficult, right? Like scheduling, finding people's schedules and figuring out how that works on an online platform has been difficult. So I think definitely creating engagement and also creating a community online has been one of the most challenging things after the COVID-19 response.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Anna. We completely understand, and it's so great that you guys are still providing like educational resources, even if you guys can't like teach in person. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your students personally? How do you think reopening schools will affect the students you work with, especially those from low income or disadvantaged communities?
Well, I think the biggest, well, actually, I don't want to speak on like what I think the biggest and not the biggest problem is, but I think a big problem has been absenteeism. So being able to take autonomy of our own schedules, especially for our younger students who maybe their families have more pressing issues to deal with, you know, signing on to online school or signing on to academic one-on-one support from our company is not the highest priority. So that is really affecting just showing up and being able to engage in these opportunities. And that obviously plays a role in school, because if you're present, your teacher is going to, I don't know, you're going to take more out of the class, and also you might have a better relationship with your teacher from being present more often. So I think it's been getting them to come online, and also being equipped with the technology that we're using. Many of the parents that we work with don't really know how to get their student to log on to their devices. So knowing how we can assist them, right? Like how can we assist them from afar if we can't even get in touch with them? So I definitely think absenteeism is going to be a huge problem, and is probably going to affect the achievement gap a lot. Yeah, that's I think the main issue that we're looking at right now.
There is a large audience for your organization, like teenagers, parents, and students. In regards to school reopening, do you have any advice you'd like to give to each of the categories?
So I think that a focus on staying in contact with your students and being able to check in on their mental health is definitely a big thing that I think schools should move forward with. Because I feel like the misconception a lot of times with what's happening, I think I mentioned this earlier, but it's the fact that with online schooling, like we need less people working, or we need less funding because we're online now. So we don't need to worry about these students coming into school. But in actuality, with school online, we need more human capital. We need more teachers. We need more people checking in on these students. And we also don't want to put all this responsibility on teachers focusing on the academic well-being and the mental well-being of our students, because that might just be too much for a teacher. So I feel like when it comes to what schools can do better for reopening is really a focus on how we can grow social emotional learning in the classroom, and also having people who their job is to check in on these students once a week, or having guidance counselors, having protocol of how guidance counselors can do that for our students, and really making sure we aren't leaving students who are just not showing up behind just because they haven't been showing up. So I think really focusing on how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting our mental health, and then how schools can take action in guiding our students through a process that is effective for them.
Thank you for that answer, Anna. That was really insightful. And I like how you brought up mental health, because like we've never experienced this before, and it's really important to like not just take care of ourselves like academically, but also to like keep our mental health in check.
Mm-hmm.
So as a student at Harvard, what's your perspective on your school's reopening, and how would you say that they're adapting to the pandemic?
I would say I think online schooling is the way to go, personally. because I feel like the benefits of hybrid schooling don't outweigh the risks of it, especially for students who maybe go to schools in New York and they're commuting back home. It just doesn't make sense for students to have to risk bringing the virus back to their families just to commute to school for something like having a more conducive learning environment for a day. So I do think that the plan to go online was a good choice. And what Harvard is doing is they're offering housing to freshmen and also to people who need housing. So people who have non-conducive home lives or non-conducive learning environments in their home, which I feel like is also thinking about the needs of students who need that housing. But I also think the process of them picking who gets to live on campus wasn't the best way of doing it, because it was kind of forcing people to like speak their trauma to a bunch of people on the Harvard board and like over dramatic, like, you know, just like it's whose trauma is more traumatic for you to decide who gets to live on campus and who doesn't. So I feel like that was weird and a little bit problematic, considering that, you know, they were like picking and choosing who deserves to get housing and who deserves to get funding for this. But overall, I think the move online is the smartest decision. I think that we just need to be more prepared for what challenges will arise from online learning and then take the steps to actually implement them during the year.
I definitely see where you're coming from. So what individual steps can students take to keep others in their community safe against COVID-19, especially those who live with older relatives? And how can teachers provide the best learning environment for your students when they come back to school?
Packed question. So how students can keep their community safe is following the guidelines that are given to us, right? Wearing masks, staying home, getting tested. Especially if you have family at home, I would say staying home, quarantining if you can. I think that colleges, what they're doing well is that they're giving housing to people who, one, don't have stable home lives, and two, people who don't want to be home and be a risk to their family. So I think having that option is really effective, but for students who are going to public schools, right, that might not always be an option. So I feel like if there's all online classes available, taking that option if you know that your family is at risk of getting the virus. So, I think number one is schedule. I feel like schools need to have a master calendar of some sort, or just like teachers being on the same page and like being in contact and knowing what's up. Because I feel like some teachers are like very rigid, like we're going to have class these 3 days of the week. Other teachers are like, fill out a when to me, we're going to figure out when's the best time next week. And I feel like that kind of dissonance doesn't work for students who already have to take way more autonomy over their schedule now that we're online. So I feel like number one is just having a schedule right up front at the beginning, the students can like commit to and know that they have to do. And then second, breakout rooms. I'm sure everybody, like, if you see any video of how to teach well, breakout rooms are really, really good because it's the closest thing to social interaction that we get from schooling online. So I feel like utilizing breakout rooms and making it so that students are more comfortable speaking to each other, just because Zoom is such a weird platform to participate in. Breakout rooms are so important in breaking down that awkwardness. I think the last part is like less of teachers. I feel like schools in general need to really think about how the other staff members that exist in their school can support teachers. Because I feel like the people who have it really the hardest right now is teachers. Because they have to consider, how am I going to teach all of my students in a way that they will come back, right? And they're incentivized to show up, and that they'll pass the standards that our city has, and that I'm considering their schedule, their home lives, and their mental well-being. So that's like so much for a teacher to consider on top of all of the work that they have to do in feedback and grading. So I feel like schools really need to think about what are they going to do with the human capital that exists? How are they going to utilize guidance counselors, social workers, college advisors, deans, like in a way that is student-centered and supportive of teachers. So that was kind of packed of an answer, but those are kind of like some things I was thinking about. And okay, wait, I have one thing. It's kind of like radical. I don't know. It's like I thought of it one day and I was like, this could work. But I was thinking that like, what are people who have high incomes doing right now to buffer the effects of online schooling? They're getting private tutoring, right? Private tutoring is blowing up as a field right now. So all of these, like, I wouldn't say rich parents, but like all these people who can afford private tutoring are doing private tutoring because this one-on-one academic support is really conducive in buffering the effects of like students not being able to meet with their teachers after school and so on. So what can we do to make one-on-one support expansive in a way that's affordable and in a way that's city sanctioned, right? And I was thinking about how can we as students support our peers in that way. So having like a school-wide or even a city-wide initiative to hiring students to being tutors for students in lower grades. And of course, that would require an expansive like training module, like a way to train students to be tutors. But I think that would be really effective in having students retain the information that they're learning and also helping students get that one-on-one support. Because when we think about it, it's like, oh, there's not enough teachers in the world, but what if we just considered all of us as also being capable of teaching? And students are also teachers, right? We're learning in a way where we can take the ways and the things that we're learning and use it for our peers. So that was just like something I was thinking of, like, how can we make one-on-one teaching accessible? And maybe that is a way that we can really start to buffer the achievement gap that's going to explode in the upcoming year.
That's honestly such an amazing idea, and that's actually the idea of where People Prep stemmed off of. Like on Instagram, I'm pretty sure you like saw the post.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think with COVID, academic or leadership opportunities will increase or decrease? Like, how will these opportunities actually be affected?
It's like, it really depends on how well you are at taking autonomy of your own schedule and also how well you are at like regulating your own emotions. Because I feel like with the pandemic, a lot of people have had one of the hardest times they've had in their lives, but also came to realize that these were good things for them, right? But it was also super difficult to get through. So I feel like, I'm losing my train of thought. Oh yeah. I feel like leadership opportunities and academic opportunities and being able to like hit up your teacher and being like, hey, I want to have a meeting to talk about this, or like actively go through like the recruitment process that people are going through requires a lot of like self-actualization that maybe especially younger students won't be able to get from an online platform or might not have the cultural capital to like take advantage of it. So I feel like this pandemic is going to really, really, really affect the achievement gap because we've made it so that we have even less support to give to students who need it. And we're not willing to figure out ways to get that support to them.
No, those were all like completely valid points. And kind of going back to what you said earlier about like student mentoring and getting kids to tutor kids in like younger grades to like narrow the achievement gap. What is your organization doing or planning to do to prepare your students for school in the age of COVID-19?
So we recently had a fundraising campaign. We recently had a fundraising campaign that was really successful, and we were able to order backpacks full of school supplies and also COVID-19 supplies, so masks and hand sanitizers for our students at Barrier Free Living. And we're also sending a bunch of books and supplies to students at the Covenant House shelter. So that was a huge thing for us. But I think what we're really trying to do is we're trying to create a predictable schedule right now for online one-on-one mentorship and academic support for our students. So like setting up a set time, making sure that our tutors and our administration are putting in protocol that allows us to constantly be in contact with our students. So like sending emails like, hey, join us, come on, come through today. Because this constant engagement, even if they're not engaging back in the beginning is super important when later down the line, they're like, wow, these people have been hitting me up every day. Maybe I'm going to pull up to a session today. And that's really where that commitment and that engagement begins. So I feel like what we're doing is we're, one, considering the actual needs of our students, asking them what they need and then sending it to them. And then two, creating that predictable routine and then constantly being committed to upholding that routine with them.
So, if you were to change something in the reopening module to better serve the needs of high school students, what would it be?
Okay. If I were to change what we're doing, I would have changed it a month ago. I feel like what we could have done better is been way more prepared for reopening schools, and also having the city consider like a citywide plan or citywide protocol that schools had to follow in order to really support our students. Because I feel like now we're like 2 weeks away and schools are like, oh shit, what do we do? And it's like, it's kind of too late now, right? Because we had this whole month where we could have really focused every day on what we could have done to prepare for reopening schools. But I feel like right now we're still in the conversation of whether it should be online or hybrid. And I feel like that's a conversation that should have happened a long time ago. And we should have then been considering, okay, what are we going to do now that we've decided if we're online or hybrid? And one thing is like having all these teachers and principals and staff members come and congregate earlier and create a master calendar, right? Creating ways of communication between teachers and between students that might work better. Getting input from students, right? Where were we in this conversation of what we're gonna do, right? Having students design how they wanna learn, and then maybe that incentivizing them to show up and be present. And also, what was it? What was the fourth thing? There was a fourth thing in my brain. It left my brain. Oh, I was gonna say, reaching out to students early. I feel like one thing that we discussed in Build during our summer program, I didn't discuss what we did this summer, but we talked a lot about educational inequity and solutions and action steps, right? Because I feel like we talk a lot about problems, we don't really talk about solutions, and we definitely don't try and implement them. So I feel like the next step is like, what do we do now? And I feel like communication is going to be a huge part of stopping absenteeism during the school year. So communicating with students right about now, right? Having guidance counselors, old teachers, like teachers whose students are recognized and are familiar with, reaching out to students and being like, hey, are you ready for the school year? Like, are you ready to learn this? What do you want to do? Like, what are you planning to do this school year? What does your home life look like? How can we be here to support you? Just making students feel seen and heard right now. Because I feel like it's still a lot of like teachers going, oh my God, what do we do? What do we do? And then the first day of school, it's like, this is what we're doing. And students are like, I don't know if that works for me. And it's really just because we were unprepared. So if my advice is really like, let's use these 2 weeks and really get it done and really like know what we're gonna do moving forward.
Definitely, you brought up a really good points. I really loved your ideas. I think that's the last of the questions, actually. It was really nice having you here, Anna. Thank you for actually coming.
Do that a lot. The first few questions, feel free to not use them because I feel like I didn't answer them the best way. Thank you guys so much for having me. I was kind of nervous, but you guys are really, really great at this, and I love what you guys are doing. I think Deepa's trying to say something. I don't know.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, your answer is really good. So like, don't worry.
My Wi-Fi is embarrassing.
Don't worry.
I'm Deepa Saha, the Director of Co-Strategy and Organization at FINXERUNT.
I'm Elizabeth Schwartz, and I'm the Vice Executive Director at FINXERUNT.
My name is Bohm Elliott Iomi. I'm the Vice President of National Beta Georgia, and I'm also the Chief Executive for Team Leadership Network.
So our first question for you is, how will school reopening affect the mission of the Team Leadership Network?
I think it doesn't necessarily affect us the way that's affecting other organizations. Yet again, we are only an Instagram page, but in a sense that it's actually less of a negative than a positive. because, this gives students a chance to actually do leadership networking, social working, different opportunities that are out there, actually out there in the physical world. So I think it's actually, helping us in a way.
I'm happy that it doesn't really affect your organization negatively. So how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your students personally? How do you think reopening schools will affect the students you work with, especially those from low-income and disadvantaged communities?
I think it's definitely affecting all of us in all sense, not just students, but all of us, because, we miss our social lives. We want to go out to the movies. We want to, spend some time with our friends. We want to do, everything we can outside. And, that takes a toll on us, physically and yet mentally. And, I think that it doesn't just affect students, but teachers, everybody for sure. So I definitely do think it takes an effect on all of us negatively.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And that's a really interesting perspective to hear. So there's a large audience for your organization, including teachers, parents, and teenagers. So in regards to school reopening, do you have any advice you'd like to give each audience category?
And advice, I think it would just be just telling the students, to follow the guidelines. And, just even though it may not even seem cool or, the most exciting thing to do, we're saving lives by doing it. So definitely by following the guidelines, and for all the parents that are, really look into what the school is doing to actually combat this virus. So I think that's probably the best advice I can give.
What individual steps can a student take to keep others in their community safe against COVID-19, especially those who live with their older relatives? And how can teachers provide the best learning environment for your students when they come back to school?
I think, right now, especially with this virus, I think the best thing for us to do that we can all do, and it's very easy, is just following the guidelines, because we are saving so much lives by doing that. We're limiting the risk, we're limiting the spread of it just by following the guidelines, staying safe, practicing good social distancing, wearing a mask. I think that's what we can do best as students.
Yeah, definitely. It's really important to follow all the guidelines, especially since we have to protect ourselves, not just in school, but outside in our community. Based on your experience as a leader of Teen Leadership Network, do you think with COVID, academic or leadership opportunities will decrease or increase? How will these opportunities be affected?
I think it actually will increase. A lot of opportunities are going to come out for this because, when there's a lot of problems, they need solutions. And, that's where we all come in. We are all leaders at some point. We're all, creators since we're young. So I do definitely think that, opportunities are going to pop up for us all.
What is this organization doing or planning to do to prepare your students for school in the age of COVID-19?
Just making sure that everybody knows their guidelines, everybody knows their state guidelines on a federal level and state level. Just trying to make sure that everybody is mental fit. Just making sure everybody's up to date and, just make sure everybody's safe and just to spread that awareness best possible.
And for our last question, if you were to change something in the reopening module to better serve the needs of high school students, what would it be?
I think you probably have to start on a federal level just to make sure that these high schools and all of these schools all around the country, that they receive the funding that they deserve, because obviously with the exposure of COVID-19, battling that is very costly and it's very expensive. And, just making sure that federally we have that taken care of. I think that would definitely be a boost, and that can help, so many people, even the underprivileged too.
Thank you for meeting with us. That was actually the last of the questions. It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you guys too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you for coming to be interviewed for the FINXERUNT school nationwide school reopening panel. So before we start, could you guys just give a brief introduction, your name, where you're from, and what your role is in Pupil Prep?
I'm Deepa Saha. I'm the founder of Pupil Prep, an upcoming junior at the Bronx High School of Science from New York.
Hi, I'm Jade. I am the co-founder of Pupil Prep, and I'm a rising senior in Bronx Science.
Hi, I'm Rohan. I'm a program director, and I run the marketing and media aspect of Pupil Prep. I'm a rising senior at Bronx Science, thus also from New York.
Great, it's really nice to meet you all. And I'm Elizabeth. I'm the vice executive director of FINXERUNT. So my first question is for you, Deepa. How will school reopening affect the mission of Pupil Prep?
Remote learning is not easily digestible for a lot of students, which is the bulk of blended models, especially for younger ones who may suffer from attention disorders. And it's a new learning environment, which may be difficult to adapt to and actually learn the material. So Pupil Prep's mission will remain grounded as an element for educational equity in our schools. Teachers have to manage a two-tiered system of remote learning and in-class lessons, which will result in a greater workload and way more stress. And we will remain as an outlet for students to get personalized help and learn in ways that are tailored to them.
Thank you for that answer. So my next question is for Rohan. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your students personally? And how do you think reopening schools will affect the students you work with, especially those from low-income or disadvantaged communities?
Right, yeah. So for one, schools in disadvantaged communities were already receiving kind of subpar funding just because of the way that our school funding system works. It's based on property taxes. And so that means that primarily these disadvantaged districts were already having problems with funding. And so while wealthier schools, like for example, Bronx Science being a specialized school is getting exemptions and getting more funding, a lot of these disadvantaged communities would have to have their schools both manage an online system, in-person system, and these teachers, again, are going to just be so stressed out. And even the argument can be made that even though the internet has so much knowledge, I feel like a lot of the schools who can afford to pay for programs or educational resources are going to be much better off. So as for Pupil Prep, since a lot of our students are actually from these disadvantaged communities or have financial barriers or language barriers, we can't fundamentally address the roots of this issue. I think that's a discrepancy that comes from the absolute fundamentals of how our schooling system works and how it's funded, etc. But we definitely can try and remedy sort of the effects that, this COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated the inequity. And we can only try and remedy that as much as we can, which is what Pupil Prep was sort of designed to do. But yeah, our mission is to connect these students with mentors who can help guide them and keep them confident in their learning abilities.
Yeah, that's really important. So speaking of which, what is Pupil Prep doing or planning to do to prepare your students and high school mentors for school in the age of COVID-19?
Right, so many of our students have spent the previous summer preparing for this upcoming school year, which means that one, our students are better adapted to remote learning. They know where they can find materials. They've had some guidance. They've had someone to help them transition to this new learning system, but also they have a really strong foundation for future learning, right? And so many of our students, if they need a slower pace to learn in the future, they already have that boosted head start into the school year. So now they can kind of go at their own pace. They can go ahead. They can try and keep up with the general school curriculum because they have this head start. And, we're going to continue this tutoring service throughout the year. And we're not just about learning the information that our school system mandates, right? We're not just about conforming to the Common Core curriculum. What we want to teach is confidence in our students to continue learning independently and to continue seeking out this natural curiosity that I'm sure a lot of them have, but the problems and the critical flaws in our school system have sort of suppressed and hindered. So our mentors, we've really, really encouraged them to build almost sibling-like relationships with their mentees, and we want to be their support systems, right? Our one thing our mentors are getting through this program is also a transparent view into what the COVID-19 pandemic is doing to a lot of these disadvantaged communities. And it's only kind of widening the gap in educational quality for a lot of these students, right? So not only do our students get this opportunity to learn and have someone to rely on, our mentors are getting an opportunity to expand their horizon past their little bubble and are learning different communities. And that's why I think that what we're doing is so important, because we're making an impact on future generations, but not just our students, but also our mentors.
That's really good to hear. And it sounds like you guys are doing really important things like in education and with your students. My next question is for Jade. What individual steps can students take to keep others in their communities safe against COVID-19, especially those who live with older relatives? How can teachers provide the best learning environment for your students when they come back to school?
So I know that elementary and middle school families have the option to opt for remote learning, but a critical issue comes for families who have both vulnerable family members in their household and financial barriers, which almost compel them to send their children to school. For example, many parents are going back to work, but who babysit their children, who will care for their children, and kind of make sure that they're just going to school online. So in addition, our public schools have never been super sanitary. A staple of the bathroom experience was that soap is difficult to come by. If we want school reopening to work, we need to clock it up by 300%. Teachers shouldn't pretend that there isn't a pandemic to alleviate stress on their students. It's been months. They know it's been happening. It may make kids feel like their school officials are neglecting or ignoring the circumstances. A lot of things have changed now. We should be able to talk about that. So teachers should emphasize that the present is massively different, but that through community, individual efforts to stay sanitary, and many more, this learning experience can be optimized. Teachers should also understand the limitations of our students. An example would be being very flexible with deadlines and making sure that these teachers are checking up on their students.
So our next question is to Deepa. As the founder of an educational nonprofit, what are the benefits and drawbacks of reopening schools?
Reopening schools isn't quite a binary. There are many iterations of how to open schools, but the general issues are that fully reopening schools are not really viable, especially with the typical school densities to restrict coronavirus spread. Fully remote learning limits face-to-face interactions, prevents students from potentially entering a learning-specific environment, especially if they're facing housing instabilities or like abusive homes, and blended materials could be too much to simultaneously juggle for everybody included, teachers, students, school administrations. And however, it is important to realize that school is a common part of a child's schedule. Mostly when it comes to elementary schools, closing early due to COVID really threw off many of their schedules. And to many students, school is a place where they grow by meeting new people, and there is a lot of developmental skills that are learned by interacting with the world around them and how to actually respect their peers.
That's really important, Deepa. Thank you. Our final question goes to Jade. What important factors should we consider when sending students back to school, especially from a mental health perspective?
All right, so current hybrid learning models claim to limit social interaction to curb spread of the virus, which is sensible. However, we should just be aware that students are not going to reclaim the social life that existed in January and February. While isolation and remote communication may have affected many kids in distinct ways, everyone involved in education should be aware that restarting schools will not remedy poor mental health. Our schools, especially as we get older, tend to add pressure and anxiety. They move from cooperation to competition, which makes lots of students feel like they're disjointed from their peers or other groups of people. That's one of the reasons we work so hard to be the support systems for them and create bonds and just be their friends. Some students are also placed in groups so they can interact with other students and exercise their teamwork and communication skills, which is really important for them as they're growing up.
Thank you So much, guys, for coming to the interview and for sharing your thoughts on what a reopening school is going to look like.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Hello, I'm Deepa Saha, and I'm the director of co-strategies and organization at FINXERUNT. Nice to meet you.
My name is Inwola Babalula, and I'm the co-founder of Reach for the Stars.
It's nice to meet you. And my name is Elizabeth Schwartz. I'm the Vice Executive Director of FINXERUNT.
So the first question. So through your tutoring program, younger students are able to get tutored free of charge. Meanwhile, older students are able to tutor students and get service hours. How do you think school reopening will affect this particular program and mission?
So basically what we are planning to do is we're planning to do an after school program and like also alongside the tutoring. So basically kids around the world can like wait for them to have like their tutor teach them to they actually like need quick response. So we're actually thinking of doing something called a tutor hotline where tutors will log in and students from all over the world can join the Zoom, and the tutors in the hotline will be able to help them with their homework.
That sounds like a really great initiative. So on to our next question. In order to relieve children's boredom, Reach for the Stars has initiated numerous creative and different ideas, like book clubs, summer camp, etc. Are you thinking of any other ideas to implement during the school year with COVID-19?
Yes. As of the week of 14th to the 20th of September, we're going to be hosting a conference. First of all, that is open to all high schoolers and college students. So that webinar is basically going to be talking about how to get started with your student-led organization. We have a lot of different speakers from all over the world. We have how to write a resume, how to do good on your college applications. And also apart from that, we actually, so this is a kind of a surprise that we're gonna launch like in the September month when like school fully starts online. So yeah, everyone should stay tuned for that.
Definitely, that sounds like an amazing idea. How has this COVID-19 pandemic affected your students personally? And how do you think reopening schools will affect the students you work with?
So on a more personal note, I school in Nigeria, and Nigeria has like a lot of like COVID cases, and as of now, I'm not going back to school in person, and most students, especially like I don't know about like I know most people around the world are like having this challenge of like getting focused with online school, which is like the new norm for everyone. So actually what we try to do is we try to create like this one-on-one bond with our students, which is like on a more personal level. And our students have like said their worries, saying that, oh, you know, I'm kind of scared about online school. Do you have any tips? So very soon we'll be launching something called the Back to School series, which will be basically advice and tips with different people from all over the world, giving the students their tips on how to like do well in online school and things like that. And the reopening schools, it will affect a lot of students because obviously the schedules will change and everything. So what we try to do is like we try to aim for flexibility between our students and our tutors. So when school resumes, obviously now it's the summer and some schools have resumed and some schools have not. So we are trying to help that flexibility, and hopefully we've actually done really good with that, and our tutors and students are still tutoring. And yeah, hopefully we can all grace back to this like online new normal for all of us. And yeah.
That sounds like a really good idea to like help your students adapt for both the high school students and other students maybe older or younger. So on to the next question. What individual steps can students take to keep others in their community safe against COVID-19, especially those who live with older relatives? How can teachers provide the best learning environment for your students when they come back to school?
So for the first question, what individual steps can students take to keep like others in their community safe against COVID-19? Well, first of all, you have to wear a mask. Like you have to stop going out without a mask. Like everyone thinks that, oh yeah, I'm a kid, I cannot get COVID-19. But very much a lot of students do get COVID-19. And if you don't want that to happen, you have to stay safe. Always wear a mask, always take around with you hand sanitizer. If you've touched the surface, like anytime I go out and if I don't take any gloves with me, I always take sanitizer. So after like I'm done checking out in the supermarket, I use hand sanitizer and always wear a mask. And for those people with older relatives, what I would say is always try to boost your immune system, because your immune system is the best way to fight any like kind of virus or anything. And personally, in my like family, what my mom allows us to take is we take ginger shots, ginger, lemon, lime, turmeric, and she mixes it all together, and we take it almost like every day to try and like get your immune system. And we always take like a fruit a day. Like it's compulsory. Like if you don't do that, you're not going to go sleep. You have to take a fruit a day. So I would say that that is what you should try to do, if especially if you're living with older relatives. And for the teachers to provide the best learning environment for your students. So it's going to be like kind of a challenge, because in some schools you have like 15 students or 20 or 30 students in class, and obviously it's 6 meters apart, and like trying to like structure the like classroom setting is kind of really hard. So what I would advise teachers to do is, I don't know, my school is taking like everything online, but like other schools try and do something called the hybrid system. Like when you do like half of your classes online and half of your classes in person, and like it's kind of like an option if you want to do it online or if you want to do it in person. And once the limit has been reached, then everyone, if like for example, let's say the limit is like 15 students. So once there are 15 students already going to for in-person school, the remaining part of the students will have to do online school, which is compulsory. So for the teachers, try and like do like check-ins with the students, because obviously this is not something that you're used to. Like they're little kids, they don't like understand what is going on. They just know like, oh yeah, there's a virus in this environment, and like how are you going to handle that? So obviously you have to like do daily check-ins with them, see how they're feeling, see if everything's going well. Next thing you can do is like try to like establish like a balance between schoolwork and like them like having normal lessons, because obviously it's not normal. Like we're not used to this. We're used to like sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day and like learning things. But now like you're transitioning everything to like online learning, and online learning is really distracting. Like if you don't know how to gain self-control, you're not going to do well in online learning. There has to be like a balance between schoolwork and like you just doing whatever you want to do on your phone, on your laptop or anything. Because I know when it was like online school for me, it was kind of distracting for me. Like I would go on my phone like all through the lesson and I would not learn anything at all. So I said, okay, this is going to affect me real time. So I had to gain self-control. And that's one of the best ways for both teachers and students to like have the best learning environment, is to like establish self-control and just try to be focused and productive.
I love the ideas that you brought up, and I also had lots of trouble focusing during quarantine. So there's a large audience for your organization, like teenagers, parents, and kids. In regards to school reopening, do you have any advice you would like to give each audience category?
Yeah, totally. So for the teenagers, we're all still trying to figure out ourselves and like trying to see our passions and everything, especially like during this time. Like you have a lot of time to like make yourself the best version ever. Like you have a lot of free time during this COVID time. Look, I've had a chance to like really develop myself in everything I do. I started practicing my clarinet more, even though like was always totally good at it, but like I never used to practice it at home. So I've like done that a lot. I've also prepared myself, like drilled myself for school exams, because Nigeria we don't do like APs and like SATs, but like some people do, but like I don't do it. So what I basically do is I do online courses with Coursera. That's also like a good way to do if you're a teenager. Also do a lot of volunteer work. So obviously like when you leave like this like situation, they're gonna ask you, what did you do during this time? Like, what exactly did you do? Like, a lot of us are proud to say, oh, so I watched TV, I watched Netflix all day, I did this, but like, what exactly have you done for your community? What have you done? So being in Nigeria, it's like changed my perspective on like a lot of things. Like, I did not know anything called nonprofit. I did not know anything called like volunteering or anything. I did not know anything at all. So what I would say is just like put yourself out there. Like, this is a new change for all of us. Like, this is something you can actually do to like get something out of it. Like, obviously when summer comes and goes, like you're just like, oh yeah, so I'm trying to do like this summer body bikini challenge, and yeah, but like try to like get something out of it. Like, even if it's like learning a new language or like drilling yourself for like APs and SATs, there's like a year, but you know, you can still drill yourself. But doing volunteer work and things like that. And for online school, I would just say like try to like focus, like try to do a lot of self-control, because I don't know about other people, but like my school is getting back on September 7th. That is 10 days from now. And basically I've organized things 3 times already. Like, it's like I've just been so organized with everything. And because I live in Nigeria and most of the stores are not open, so I have to do online shopping from Walmart and things like that. So I should like get most of my school books and everything by this week. So just try and be organized. Try and stay connected with your friends, because obviously, like, you've not seen each other for like 6 months, and it sometimes gets to your head. So try and stay connected with your friends. Be focused. Gain self-control. Try and limit yourself from like screen time. Like, really, I haven't like watched Netflix in a long time. That is something that's really changed my mind. Listen to podcasts, listen to TED courses, like TED Talks, sorry. Like, I listen to a lot. And yeah, that is my advice for teenagers and for parents. So kids and teenagers are still trying to like get used to the fact that, oh, this is different. Like, I don't know what is going on. Like, I literally haven't watched the news for a long time because I don't want to stay in the negativity and like the talks. I don't want to be there. So parents should just know that like kids are still having like a hard time like knowing what all this is about. Like, try to like structure what they need to do. So also for like, there are a lot of learning things that you can do. Like, for parents, in fact, like you can register your kids for like anything at all. Like, obviously, like you can register us for like your tutoring. Like, if you want your kids to like gain like extra knowledge, there are a lot of free resources. There's Khan Academy. If your child is doing AP, there's Fiveable. If you want your kids to like be like more creative and everything, obviously Read for the Stars is open for all. And like parents are just know like kids are really trying their best to structure it, and like doing like stuff like family game nights and like just things to make you guys like closer, like a bond together, to know like, oh yeah, so mom, dad, I can totally like trusting you guys for anything. Like, try and have like their close bond with your kids, because it's really important, especially like during these times. And to the kids out there, you're young, have a good life. You only live once. Like, when you become a teenager, you're gonna like look back and say, "Oh, I wish I did this when I was still a kid." Well, technically, teenagers are still kids. It's just, you know, the teen factor. So when you turn 13, you're gonna look back and you're gonna be like, "Oh my God, I wish I did this." So try and create a lot of memories, especially like during this COVID time. Like, I have had a lot of time to learn a lot of things. And one thing my dad always says rather, is that no matter what situation you are, always keep learning. Like, learning never stops. Like, at a point, like, I'm the kind of person that does like really well academically, and like during the summer I still drill myself, and it's kind of really important because during this time you can do like a lot of like catching up on schoolwork and everything, and you never know, like you just never know like where opportunities like gonna knock on your door. Like, it's really vague. You have a lot of different things you can do. You can enter competitions, you can do internships, you can just do a lot of things. Even though you're young and all, like there are a lot of things. Like, there are some kids that they're just 6 and like they can code, They can like make games. They can do a lot of stuff. So you're not too young to make a difference in the world. And I feel like that's the most thing you need to tell kids. Like, you're not too young to do anything, because I always thought you had to be a certain age before I could start doing this kind of stuff. Like, I had to be this age before I could start, like, doing science research and stuff like that. So just know you're never limited to, and this is for everyone. Like, you're not limited to anything. Like, it doesn't matter like where you're from, what culture you are, which country you're from. Everyone has the same 24 hours in a day. And those 24 hours, it is by your choice. Do you want to be productive? Do you want to be unproductive? So it's your choice to see what you gain from this pandemic that can also be used as a learning experience. And it's also your own like choice. If you just want to slack off, watch Umbrella Academy 24/7 and do nothing. So those are my basic like advice to like everyone out there. And yeah.
Thank you so much for coming, and your words were really inspirational. And I have two brothers who are 10, so I'll definitely tell them to follow your advice.
So stay tuned for our conference on the September 14th to 20th, where we have a lot of speakers, different organizations sharing their story and saying what they learned from leading student-led organizations, whether or not your organization needs to be a 501c3 to verify service hours, on a lot of insightful tips. If you're in college, we have a lot of college panel coming. If you're in high school, there's still a lot of stuff you can do, so you make sure to check it out. And yeah, hopefully we see you guys there. And thank you so much for having me. It's been a fun time coming here and sharing insightful tips.
Thank you, Enola. Have a good day.
Thank you, Enola.
Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, it's really nice to meet you. I'm Deepa. I'm the Director of Co-Strategy and Organization at FINXERUNT.
Hi, I'm Mihika, and I'm the founder and CEO of Gen Z Education.
It's so nice to meet you. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm the Vice Executive Director of FINXERUNT.
So going with the first question. How will reopening schools affect the work of Gen Z Education?
So Gen Z Education is entirely online based, and we focus on providing education through a variety of different means for everyone that can access online resources. So reopening schools won't negatively impact it in any way. If we'll be getting more tutors and more availability for Gen Z Education, and we'll be also branching out to provide more education-based and academic curriculum.
That's really good to hear. We've noticed that a lot of these online organizations, it's really good to have them right now because they're reaching so many students and educating so many people. So on to our next question. How do you think the reopening of schools will affect students in general?
I think reopening schools is going to, depending on the individual schools' modules and reopening learning modules, it'll be different. But I think one major thing that will be impacted is the mental health of students, because over quarantine, we saw that mental health diminished greatly because of the lack of contact with people, etc. And then reopening schools will positively impact, but also have a certain negative impact, that students are going to be more stressed, perhaps more anxious about getting COVID-19, or even trying to keep up with all their schoolwork after a long break. So I think mental health is something that would be prioritized in this time, and that should be prioritized in this time.
I love the fact that you brought up mental health, and that's a big thing that we have to worry about. But what advice do you have for students that are going back to school?
So if you're online learning still, when you're going back to school, then I would say focus in advance and prepare in advance for your classes, because it's very easy to get distracted when online, and once you procrastinate, it's hard back on track. And then if in person, as some schools around the nation are going back in person, then just remember to stay safe, because the pandemic isn't over yet. So just try to get a fixed schedule and maintain all components of your health, physical and mental, and just make sure overall you're doing well.
Yeah, I know from personal experience, it can be a bit difficult to focus with online learning. But what you said is really important, especially about mental health and physical health, and just making sure that you're balanced and you don't just stress about school. So as an organization that works to analyze the education system, what are some necessary steps teachers and administrators should take to prepare for a successful school year?
I think a major step that needs to be made is the focus on understanding and not just finishing, because teachers are often focused on getting through the material and not necessarily making sure their students get the material. It's very common for teachers to say, oh, we're running behind, let's pick up the pace, let's hurry up, let's get through this, and then you have a test next week. So students focus on rote memorization and things that aren't actually going to help them in any way. So they're not going to be learning the material, they're going to be struggling when it comes to exams at the end of the year. So I think just one big step that needs to be made is a focus on going slower at times and not stressing about getting through it, but actually stressing about understanding it. And then, of course, as mentioned before, prioritizing the mental and physical health of students, especially during these times, which can negatively impact academic work as well.
Sounds awesome. What is the organization doing or planning to do to prepare your students for the school year in the age of COVID-19?
So our organization is working on providing genuine learning, as mentioned before, actual understanding and not just rote memorization. And we do this in a few different ways. We provide blog posts on topics that are educational, meaning academic and related to school subjects, political relating to current world events, and recreational that are a variety of means that students would be interested in. And overall, we're trying to help decrease the lack of education equity in the world. We're trying to partner with low-income schools, just provide online access to a lot of different students from a lot of different backgrounds, and just overall trying to fix the currently not so great education system that exists.
Thank you so much for that. And I really like how you brought up the point about giving access to education for low-income students, because low-income students and marginalized groups are the most affected by the pandemic and the reopenings of schools. So really great that you brought that up.
Yeah, definitely.
And finally, if you were to change something about the reopening module to better serve the needs of students, what would it be?
So all schools currently are kind of taking on a different approach to reopening, also depending on where you are in the nation or even in the world. Some speeding up, some schools are opting for online. But one major thing I would change would be the scheduling, because I saw in some in-person modules especially that students are just going right back into how they were before, and we kind of have to understand that the world isn't going to return to the way it was before, at least not for a long time. So I would just say prioritize the scheduling, make sure there's not too many students in one place at once, and also make sure there's a place for students to talk about anxiety, mental health problems that they're experiencing as a result of quarantine, because I know a lot of people that are struggling with this currently and are not able to prioritize their academic work as a result of it. So overall, I think there needs to be a way for students to talk about this, maybe have some discourse even, or just a way to vent their feelings to it. And schools should be focusing on that, since at this time we can't really be focused 100% on academics. There has to be some give and take.
That's actually the last of the questions. Thank you for being here, Mihika.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming, Mihika. It was really great to hear your perspective on all of this.
For sure, thank you for having me.